be able to get somebody up here?
Well, of course, ma'am. We're coming up to you.
Well, there's no one here yet, and the floor is completely engulfed. We're on the floor, and we can't breathe.
Okay.
And it's very, very, very hot.
Okay.
All I see is smoke.
Oh, please,
I'm going to die, aren't I?
No.
I'm going to die.
Ma'am, say your prayers. And we're not. We're going to think positive because you got to help each other get off the floor.
I'm going to die. No, it's so hot. I'm burning up. Hello! Help!
Hello, ma'am?
It's a small world. It's a small world. It's all one. It's a small world. Living in one small world. It's a small world. It's all one. It's a small world. Living in one small world. It's a small
world. On September 11, 2001, I was employed by a company called Euro Brokers, and our offices were on the 84th floor of the South Tower, which was the second building to be hit that day with an airplane. And I was working away at my computer, and at 8:46 in the morning, there was this loud boom.
At 8:46 and 40 seconds, American Airlines Flight 11 hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center, causing extensive damage between the 93rd and the 99th floors.
And the announcement from the Port Authority came, "Your attention, please. Building 2, our building, Building 2 is secure. There is no need to evacuate Building 2. And 2 or 3 minutes later, I started talking with one fellow named Bobby Call. And Bobby told me that he had been down about 8 floors, 10 floors, heard the announcement, and had come back up. And as he was telling me this, boom, boom, this double explosion, and our building shook.
At 9:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175 hits the South Tower.
Everything just exploded in our room. Now we're on the 84th floor. What I didn't know at the time was that the second plane had hit 6 floors below us on the 78th floor. So we're 6 floors above impact. I heard this banging on the wall and this faint scream for help inside the 81st floor. I hooked underneath him and I pulled him up. He said later that I was like Superman. And we came up and over and I fell back down on my back. And this stranger landed on top of me and he gave me this big kiss. We got up, dusted ourselves off, and I said, "Come on, let's go home."
The two towers shake considerably with the first impact, but they immediately return to their original structural position. Why? Because they were specifically designed to do this in the event of a plane crash.
Towers were very solidly built. It's like a tree. You see, when you bend a tree, you have all these fibers in the tree, but they're interconnected. So when the tree bends, it can handle that motion.
Nevertheless, 56 minutes after Flight 175 strikes the South Tower, it suddenly collapses in on itself.
tower that we just come out of, we started to see it, boom, 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 move. And we stared in disbelief as this took about 8 or 10 seconds for the whole tower just to go straight down and dissolved into its own ash.
We started to go in, and all of a sudden there were people jumping from the towers. One jumped down and hit a fireman. At 10:28, the North Tower also collapses. I threw away my oxygen mask to make me lighter. I started running because when I turned around, I saw the tower coming down. Then there was all this dust that got me.
Do not hit anybody as you drop.
When I got home, all my family was waiting for me. And I was lucky to come back to my family. All my friends, they never came back.
Lying in my bed, the alarm went off. I just shook my head. I said, damn, I'm late again. I went downstairs and my wife came in. She said, you won't believe what the message just did. Took the whole thing down. I started shaking, I could hardly believe it when I heard a man on my TV said, somebody let the devil out. Somebody let the devil out. Somebody let the devil out. And it'll take a long shoe to get them right down to hell. I took my kids right out of their school. They were smoking the air, and the answer, it was true that the bad men died. I said, yeah, honey, they can't hurt you or me or your mama or your sister too. And I said a little prayer as I lied. I walked up the street to the grocery store, heard an old man singing about the second war. Said, somebody let the devil out. Somebody let the devil out. Somebody let the devil out. And it'll take a long shoe to get them back down to hell. And a Jew, they were holding hands crying. There was nothing they could do, cause nothing could be done. And then it all fell down like a house of cards. cards. All the people were escaping, they were running from the shards. A glass that fell down from the sky. But they ran into the trouble to see who could be saved in the city of New York and the home of the brave. Somebody let the devil out. 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 Gonna take a long shoe to get them back down to hell. Somebody let the devil out. 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 Somebody let the devil out.
The official justification for the inexplicable collapse of the Twin Towers was written by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Between 2002 and 2006, they studied the demolition of the World Trade Center, reaching the conclusion that the collapse of the towers was caused by the combined effects of the impact of the airplanes and the resulting fires started by these impacts.
Ma noi sappiamo.
We have been told by the very people who designed and built these towers that they should have resisted the impact of more than one airplane.
Anche con l'impatto di più di un aereo.
We have to ask ourselves, did the engineers and architects imagine that airplanes could crash into the towers without any fuel?
Sopra le torri senza carburante. Pensavano fosse
Perhaps they thought that the airplanes could get there by just blowing in the breeze.
Never before or after 9/11 have steel-framed towers collapsed due to fire.
Nel 2005 a Madrid.
In 2005, there was a fearsome conflagration in Madrid. A skyscraper went up in flames. It was a huge torch that kept burning for 20 hours. 20 consecutive hours. But in the end, the load-bearing structure remained intact. The skyscraper did not fall down. As you can see, the building is enveloped in flames. This skyscraper was not yet complete. It was still under construction. Nevertheless, it remained standing. Something you should note is the white color of the flames. This means that there is a lot of oxygen burning. If you look at the flames coming from the two towers in New York, we can see instead that the flames are dark red and the smoke is black.
The fires that were burning in these towers was a dark gray, a heavy, almost black gray smoke coming off. This implies an oxygen-starved fire.
Nevertheless, 55 minutes later, the whole tower collapses. According to the official NIST version of events, at a certain point, the steel structure of the towers gave way. It no longer had the structural strength that it had at the beginning. And all of this was supposed to be because of the immense heat. And here is something difficult to explain. We know that at some point certain people managed to walk down from the top of this tower and cross the point where the fire was strongest. Somehow they reached the bottom of the tower. How did they manage to do that?
I don't know. When I looked down there, I didn't see flames. I just sensed that it was the right thing to go and try and test it. We would go as far as we could until we were stopped by flames. And when we came to the 78th floor, the last layer was standing, but it was cracked. And there were flames licking up the other side of the wall like this. It wasn't a roaring inferno. I sensed that the flames were maybe starved for oxygen right there, you know, in the interior. We kept going, and we got onto the 74th floor. When we got down that far, normal conditions. The lights were on, fresh air coming up from below.
So the temperature inside the building was not particularly high, as we can see from the presence of this woman who is standing at the precise point where the plane impacted. In order to verify the way the buildings collapsed and how the heat had affected the steel, NIST commissioned numerous tests, some of which were conducted by a company called Underwriters Labs.
And Kevin Ryan, he's the former employee from Underwriters Laboratories who challenged the NIST report. And he went public with it. And within a week he was fired from his job.
We did test the floor models in August of 2004. And those tests disproved the primary theory behind the collapses in buildings. It was called the pancake theory. The floors would collapse upon each other into a stack of pancakes, and then the columns were no longer supported and the columns would fall apart. Well, the floor models didn't collapse in the tests, and these were in furnaces. You know, testing furnaces, much hotter temperature, longer periods of time. They still didn't collapse. So, yeah, a few months later, the government put out an update on their report. And they stated not only that the floors did not collapse, but they had done tests on the few samples they had saved from the fire zones. And those tests proved that the temperatures were very low. Temperatures were not hot enough to even soften steel. And yet, they're coming out with a summary statement that says that's what actually did happen, that the floors did collapse and the steel did soften. So they either downplayed those results or ignored those results, and they ended up putting it all in a computer.
Thanks to computers, NIST managed to straighten this problem out, and the old pancake theory was replaced by the inward bowing theory. According to the Institute, the heat weakened the floors, which started to curve downwards. The external walls of the towers also curved inwards until they could no longer bear the weight of the structures above, causing the towers to collapse.
Their final theory is almost entirely computer-based. And the computer itself is not really accessible. They haven't given it to us to examine. After having investigated it more over the last year and a half, I found that yes, they did contradict their test results, but additionally they also did manipulate the test parameters. They doubled one thing, they cut something else in half. For example, their story says that aircraft combustibles were at 13 tons in the aircraft cabin. The FAA says it's more like an average of 6.5 tons. It's double. So they double it. They double the time that their computer model exposes columns to fire, 90 minutes instead of what we know is 45 or 50 minutes in both of the buildings, actually. So they double it. They cut something else in half. They double it.
One of the things that particularly struck me was the incredible speed with which the towers came down. There was something truly inexplicable about the speed of the collapse. If we dropped a weight from a height of around 400 meters, which was the height of the towers, the time it would take to reach the ground, supposing that there was not even any air resistance to slow down the speed of the fall, would take approximately 9 seconds.
Took about 8 or 10 seconds for the whole tower just to go straight down.
The impact was at about 2/3 of the way up the tower. Even if the section above collapsed suddenly due to the structure giving way, And even considering that the impact of the section above was enormous and therefore in some way weakened the resistance of the structures below, it is clear that, due to the resistance of the undamaged part below, this tower should not have fallen at such a speed. But it fell as if there was nothing below it, whereas there was an enormous structure below, a resistant structure that should have slowed down the speed of the collapse considerably.
Dick Cheney's got a gun. Dick Cheney's got a gun. Safety's come undone. Squinting in the Texas sun. What did our leader do? Who did put a bullet through? They say when Cheney goes to Texas, you'll find him hunting fish and game. His body had it coming, 'cause when Cheney's got a gun, he's just not that good at taking aim. Cheney's got a gun. Dick Cheney shot someone. Cindy Sheehan better run. Better watch her liberal buns. Tell him that the war's not through. It probably put a hole in you. He tracked a little bitty birdie, hoping to blow out its brains. They say the smell that he gets under from double barrel thunder makes his eyes pop out like he's insane. Run away from the vice president, yeah, yeah, yeah. Run away, run from Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney's got a gun. The safety's come undone. Cindy Sheehan better run.
Qui, vicino alle due torri, c'è un'altra
Here,
torre.
close to the two towers, there was another large tower, which was hit by the debris from the tower that collapsed.
Questa torre che è crollata.
This building, this huge, it was this 47-story building, was never hit by a jet. And yet it came down that same day, but 7 hours after the last tower fell, 7 hours later. We measure the time of fall. The fall is almost free fall speed.
The collapse of the North Tower inflicts some damage to Building 7, causing fires to ignite on a few floors. Even the official version admits that fire has a low probability of causing the collapse. But why does total collapse take place? And why does it occur at freefall speed?
As I saw the collapse of World Trade Center 7, I realized this was something that needed to be studied and could not be ignored.
Building 7 and the Twin Towers share one utterly bewildering similarity: the presence of molten metal found in the debris of all three buildings weeks after the collapse.
Is this molten metal that we have now studied at length that came from these buildings and existed then in pools underneath the rubble of all three skyscrapers, both towers and Building 7.
A metallographic analysis was conducted by a specialized institute that examined the structure of a girder taken from ground zero.
Quando sono state sfilate queste travi, la parte che era sotto le macerie pare.
When these girders were extracted from under the rubble, it seems as if parts of them had melted. This is totally inexplicable because the temperatures reached by the fires could only have been 800 degrees at the most. To melt a steel girder, you have to reach temperatures of around 1600 degrees. How could this be? At a microscopic level, if you examine the granular structure of the steel, one can detect the presence of an element that should not normally be present, and it is there in substantial quantities. It is sulfur.
We're quite sure now where this molten metal came from. It comes from a material called thermate, which is aluminum powder, iron oxide, and sulfur.
The temperature is so high that steel melts. It could only melt if the temperature reached over 1000 degrees in a few seconds. The use of thermite could certainly have caused the fusion apparent in the steel beams.
You see, the presence of thermite now in these buildings to bring them down implies that someone had to place the thermite near the steel columns in order to cut through the columns. I have interviewed a demolition expert, and he said this is what they do. They set explosives. They can use radio control to initiate the firing of the explosive. They have to be done in a sequence in order to get the building to come down rapidly and straight down. A controlled demolition. Scientists, we look at different hypotheses, different explanations, but then we have to look at all the data to see which explanation fits the best. You have to incorporate all the picture. Yes, you may take an isolated fact like the plume and say, well, perhaps that was a high air pressure that somehow blew a window out, but that will not account for the molten metal or the sulfidation or the molten pools.
When the South Tower collapsed and blew into my apartment directly across from the World Trade Center, I saved the dust. I gave it to Stephen Jones.
The dust that was provided by Mrs. McKinley is very interesting because it's like a snapshot of the residue being produced by the tower during its collapse. It's perfect. Now we look in the dust and we see metal droplets. And when I saw that, I thought, whoa. This is what I expect from thermite because I've done a number of thermite experiments and you get small metal drops being thrown out in all directions. And this is what we see in the dust now, these little metal drops. We also see barium. This is very interesting because barium nitrate and sulfur are part of the military patent on what is known as thermate. This is thermite with sulfur and barium nitrate added to make this material cut more rapidly through steel. Now, barium is a very toxic metal, so one would not ordinarily expect this to be present in the large concentrations that we see. So the fact that we see it in these and in the dust is a very strong indication to me that the military form of thermite that has been used.
It turned out that literally dozens of firefighters and emergency medical workers had given testimony that they had heard 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, some said 10 explosions going off in the building. Some of the people in the buildings reported that they were banged around and knocked downstairs by explosions. Other people testified to seeing flashes. And many of them said, it looked just like on TV when we see them bring down buildings with explosions. We saw the flashes, we saw the demolition rings, we heard the sound.
This song goes out for all the 9/11 victims. We got Bin Laden.
When I get older, I will remember when I found out that Bin Laden was pronounced dead. He was pronounced dead. He was pronounced dead. He was pronounced dead. Whoa. When I get older, I will remember when I found out that Bin Laden was pronounced dead. He was pronounced dead. He was pronounced dead. He was pronounced dead. Whoa.
We got him once and for all. America stand tall. Osama's dead. Pakistan will eventually fall. Navy SEALs took care of the business. One shot kill Osama dead in the ditches. So wave your flags high, wave them in the sky. Reppin' USA, bitch, till the day I die. We unite as one, reppin' blue and white. Osama's dead, pop a bottle, victory's in sight. 2011 will be the best year. Osama lived the Middle East in the rear, so have no fear, the vision's clear. USA world leader, cheers.
When I get older, I will remember when I found out that Bin Laden was pronounced dead. He was pronounced dead. He was pronounced dead. He was pronounced dead. Whoa. When I get older, I will remember when I found out that Bin Laden was pronounced dead. He was pronounced dead. He was pronounced dead. He was pronounced dead. Whoa.
For Bush it took 8 years, Obama only 3. Now we got Osama at the bottom of the sea. First stop Afghanistan, then on to Pakistan. With USA you can't hide in the desert sand. God bless America, we always prevail. Our Navy SEALs are right on Osama Bin Laden's tail. We woke a sleeping giant, the nation stood as one. Your life is over thanks to the bullet of a Navy's gun. Been almost 10 years since that dreadful day. Saw both twin towers fall, leaving us all in dismay. Victims of 9/11, may you rest in peace. We got that mother confirmed deceased.
I worked there for 20 years and I was a janitor, the person that cleaned all the floors. The building has 6 up-levels of basement. The support companies for the cleaning of the World Trade Center were located on Big 1. While I was there at 8:46, all of a sudden we hear boom, an explosion so hard that pushed us up. When I went to verbalize it, like 6 seconds after, we hear that boom, that impact all the way on the top. So 2 different events. And at that very moment, when I said, "Oh my God," a guy comes running into the office, and this guy had his hands extended, both arms like this, and his skin was pulled totally from both arms, and it was hanging from the top of the fingertips like it was clothing. And I thought at that time that it was clothing. And when I went to say something, I realized, I look at his face, I realized that he had missing parts of his face.
He had, on that particular day, the only master key. He went up with a master key, unlocking door after door so firemen could get in, and he himself, I think he said, brought out 15 or 20 people.
So I started opening the doors of the stairwells so people could escape.
Willie was made a hero, and he was at the White House, and we have a picture of that, of George Bush honoring Willie Rodriguez for being a hero.
We hear boom, 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 different explosions. And I asked the fire department, I said, "What is this explosion?" And what they said was, maybe it's the gas tank from the kitchen. No, the kitchens were all electrical, so that didn't make any sense.
I heard a loud explosion, an explosion that I had never heard in my whole life, an enormous explosion.
My ears were hearing loud explosions at ground level, very mysterious. Explosions that seemed to be at ground level as opposed to high in the air.
There's no question in my mind that those buildings, based on the law of physics, could not have collapsed without the assistance of a bomb.
No! When I hear another explosion, no! I think it's a bomb.
Willie has taken the really 180% turn of events, saying here that President Bush, who had honored him being a hero, he's named on this lawsuit as accusing Bush and Cheney and Senior Bush and others of murder. And he's not doing it for any monetary gain, because this has just cost us everything. Willie has lost his home, lost his job. Right now, his goal is to find out the truth.
According to the official story of the 11th of September, at 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon. This rare footage shows the scene immediately after the impact, an hour before the entire structure collapsed. As you can see, it is a rather unusual scene. One would reasonably expect to see something of this sort. That is to say, pieces of the airplane, suitcases, debris everywhere, just like every other air crash on land. Instead, there is no substantial visual evidence of debris.
I have been on some accident investigation sites in the Air Force, and I have never come across any accident scene where there's no telltale evidence of the airplane that crashed. Here we have airplane sites, crash sites, that give zero evidence.
Where did the aeroplane go? Did it break up against the wall of the Pentagon? If it had done so, thousands of parts of the plane should have been scattered all over the disaster zone.
You know, things like engines and landing gears, brakes and tires are very difficult to destroy. Very difficult, because they're made out of very high-tempered steel, and I don't believe the airplane could be made to go fast enough to pulverize those things. I've never seen that happen before. You look around, there's a 16-foot hole for an airplane that's 100 and some feet wide.
According to the official story, the American Airlines Boeing 757 disappeared inside this hole. Can you see it? 5 meters. I repeat, 5 meters in diameter. Let's make some calculations. A Boeing 757 is, including its wingspan of course, 38 meters wide. And including the rudder or the tail fin, it is 13.5 meters high. To get all of this huge aircraft into a hole 5 meters wide seems rather implausible to me. In this picture, we can see a row of windows on this side and another row on that side. They should have been smashed and destroyed by the wings, and instead they're intact. These windows aren't even broken. For years, the military refused to answer the questions of an increasing number of people who rejected the official version. When the French journalist Thierry Masson published the book The Incredible Lie, utterly surreal explanations were put forward to shut the detractors up. One of these maintained that the airplane had been vaporized by the speed and the force of the crash. One very strange thing that doesn't make sense is the disappearance of various components of this Boeing. For example, the 2 engines. And what about the plane's wings? Where did they go? Had they been gasified? Instead, we are told the fuselage remained intact, and it smashed through the whole outer wall of the Pentagon and emerged through the other side, destroying a number of columns. The most solid part of the airplane is without any doubt the engines. In fact, these engines are made of a titanium steel alloy. It is so tough that it doesn't even melt at 3,000 degrees centigrade. Well now, in this wall we should be able to see, if nothing else, the holes made by the two engines that smashed into it. No, there is no sign of them. The two holes that we'd expect to see are not there.
Wake up people, turn off the TV. What you think of this news is just a movie. There's war going on and poverty. Wanna be you crap about celebrities. They simplify things to make you dumb. They'll even tell you Santa's closer to the sun. The last thing that they want is for the slave to think. That's why they're putting poison in your food and drink. They send us to silence to never praised. Only the good guys are ever blown away. Give up all your rights and you'll be saved from the big bad Time Lord in a cave. Islamic nuts don't snort cocaine. The way good flight school dropouts have such good aim. Cheney must have been flying no planes. So P-Tech and Mitra and the FAA. The true world searching free from global tyranny. Wake up American slums. 9/11 was an inside job. 9/11 was an inside job. Two towers fall symmetrically. Injecting steel beams more than 500 feet. Tower 7 falls at free fall speed. Reported in advance by the BBC. The perfect excuse to go to war, to gain power and control and kill millions more. Many other buildings have suffered worse, but none have ever turned into a cloud of dust. Explosions were heard throughout the day. Molten metal was seen flowing away. The car was still burning after months of rain. And what's to do with this explosive paint? Trains explode in major cities, destroyed by bombs made by the military. The holes suggest they were attached underneath. God save our racist Nazi queen. The truth will set you free from global tyranny. Wake up American slums. 9/11 was an inside job. The truth will set you free from global tyranny. Wake up American slums. 9/11 was an inside job. 9/11 was an inside job.
There's no indication of the wings hitting anything at the Pentagon, like you had at the North Tower. You can see the outline of the aircraft, the 25-degree bank angle. You can clearly see the outline of the number 1 engine, fuselage, and number 2 engine. It's a 25-degree bank. The wing dihedral is up in flight, and you can clearly see the outline of that airplane. But you can't find anything like that in the Pentagon. You can't find anything like that in the Pentagon.
These inconsistencies have created more and more difficulties for the proponents of the official version. So, while the military kept silent during this debacle, various photos of airplane debris found on the external lawns and along the supposed route of the airplane within the building started appearing in newspapers and on the web.
Va bene, niente gassificazione.
Very well, they admitted there was no gasification, but another theory was immediately put forward. It suggested that in order to enter a hole 5 meters wide, at a certain moment, the airplane somehow closed up its wings, just as dragonflies do. The plane entered the hole. Oh look, there they are. The engine and the other pieces of the plane were found there.
One of my experiences in the Army was being in charge of the Army's imagery interpretation for scientific and technical intelligence during the Cold War. I measured pieces of Soviet equipment from photographs. It was my job. I look at the hole in the Pentagon, and I look at the size of an airplane that was supposed to have hit the Pentagon. The plane does not fit in that hole. So what did hit the Pentagon? What hit it? Where is it? What hit it? Where is it? What's going on?
General Arnold, that very morning, immediately after that alleged impact, ordered one of his fighter pilots to fly over and down to the Pentagon to look and see what he saw and to report back to General Larry Arnold himself.
At that time, Major General Larry Arnold was Commander of Aviation at NORAD, North American Aerospace Defense Command, in charge of protecting the United States and Canada.
His fighter pilot reported back to him that there was no evidence, zero evidence, of an impact of a plane at the Pentagon.
Since the Pentagon possessed 86 separate and complete video recordings of the incident, why didn't they show some whole portions of them to those people who had doubts about it?
The FBI was immediately at the scene and took the surveillance tapes and confiscated 86 videotapes, both in the Pentagon parking lot, in the gas station, across the freeway from the Pentagon, in a nearby hotel, in all kinds of buildings that had their cameras trained in that general area.
For a long time, the military authorities refused to release the footage of Flight 77's impact. But in 2006, the United States Department of Defense was forced to yield to Freedom of Information requests, and it released 4 video sequences. The video evidence from the Pentagon Citgo gas station and the nearby Sheraton Hotel are of no use. But 2 samples of video footage captured from the Pentagon's parking lot have been offered to the world as definitive proof of Flight 77's impact with the Pentagon. They're almost identical.
Jet engines don't emit white smoke. You have some white smoke would come out of the aft end of whatever kind of vehicle. Quite frankly, there's not enough in those photographs to tell exactly what it was. Well, you can tell what it wasn't. And it didn't have the size as compared, if it was a real 757-200, it would be much bigger than the vehicle we do see in the picture.
With the best will in the world, can you see an airplane here? The Pentagon tells us you cannot see the airplane because, unfortunately, it passed between one frame and the next. One frame and the next. So where is the airplane? According to FBI agent Jacqueline Maguire, as you can see in this affidavit, only one camera took pictures of the scene, and those are the frames that we've already seen. The story of how this airplane is supposed to have got there is absolutely absurd. One cannot imagine how, in order to get down to the height of the Pentagon wall, it was able to make a 270-degree turn at a speed of approximately 800 kilometers per hour.
That is a really difficult maneuver, and what I will say to you is that an experienced pilot with thousands of hours probably would have to take between 10 and 20 attempts. Skilled, thousands of hour pilot, probably 10 or 20 times before they would be able to pull off that maneuver. 757 is not designed to do that. 757 is designed to be basically a cruise ship in the sky. It's not acrobatic, so you just can't do that with one of those big airplanes. The air traffic controllers at the Dulles Approach Control, when they saw this target come in and make this turn, they said, oh, that's a fighter. Because military fighters can do that. Okay? And military fighters with autopilots and being flown remotely, they have the structural capability. They are designed to be able to be that acrobatic.
Absurdity of absurdities. There is also the height at which this aeroplane was flying to be explained. It is supposed to have followed the lie of the land at 6 meters from the ground for 1 kilometer, managing also to jump over a hill. Then it went over a roadway, and it finally got there without making any other turns because by now there was no more space.
Have the airplane, the story has the Flight 77 was going 530 miles an hour, 460 knots, and it can't go that fast on level flight, down that low. If you're up high, the true airspeed can go up, and it can go that fast, but not down low. The air is too dense.
I challenge any pilot anywhere. Give him a Boeing 757, tell him to do 400 knots 20 feet above the ground for half a mile. Can't do. It's aerodynamically impossible.
So the story of how the airplane hit the Pentagon just doesn't make any sense at all.
After Hani Hanjour, the plane's pilot, had been identified, his flight instructor declared that his student was not even able to fly a small single-engine aeroplane.
These guys didn't have the experience to make that kind of maneuver, even if the airplane could fly that.
The man could not fly at all.
There's no way you could possibly come out of a 172 and fly a jet that you've never flown before. That's like showing me how to carve up a Christmas turkey and then say, go make a heart transplant.
Even if we suppose that such an incompetent pilot had the opportunity to fly a Boeing 757, we still have to ask ourselves how he managed to violate the most heavily protected airspace in the world.
Lo spazio aereo più protetto del mondo.
No untracked aircraft get near the Pentagon and near the White House. It just doesn't happen.
In Washington, D.C., we have one of the most restricted airspaces in the world. It's called P-56. It has a separate radar tracking system and a separate military response system.
P-56 is that restricted airspace that is around the Pentagon and the White House, and it is a highly, highly, highly sensitive area. There are supposed to be no unknown aircraft that can go through there.
That has an air defense identification zone in a 50-mile radius around D.C., and then it has a protected zone 17 miles around the Washington Monument and an inner protected zone 3 miles around the Capitol. That space is essentially unbreachable. It has to be because of the importance of the buildings there.
It's like an aviation no man's land. Nobody goes in there. Nobody.
They have F-16 and F-18 jets at Andrews Air Force Base about 10 miles south of D.C. They also have the 113th National Guard Air Wing at Anacostia Naval Air Station that can send scrambler jets up in a very short period of time. Both are in place that day. Neither one responds at all until after the Pentagon is hit. In addition to that, the Pentagon has its own defenses.
If a plane, any kind of a plane, was coming in towards the Pentagon, why didn't the anti-aircraft missiles batteries that are there, why didn't they fire to protect the building? This is, after all, the most heavily protected building on the planet. That craft had to have been a military craft, because only the military craft put out a signal. It's called an Identify Friend or Foe IFF device. And only the military craft would be allowed to approach the building.
The two radar systems that the military radars, defensive radar systems, read are a civilian transponder and a military transponder. Military transponder is called IFF. Civilian aircraft do not have an IFF transponder. They are not given that capability. Okay? So if there was a 757, American 757 that went into the Pentagon, for example, and it shut off its transponder, it didn't have a military IFF transponder on it. So it was a primary target. It's a primary target going into that airspace. Should have been shot down.
What I'm describing to you is a breakdown in standard operating procedure by FAA, NORAD, P-56, and the Pentagon, all on the same day, in the middle of, after 9/05, what was known nationally to be a terrorist attack. And it makes no sense.
Nobody goes in there.
This is, after all, the most heavily protected building on the planet.
This doesn't make any sense at all.
The Pentagon symbolizes our military power in the world. And they had hit it. And to this day, nobody knows what they hit it with, whether it was an airplane or whether it was a missile. And our government will never tell us.
9/11 was an inside job! 9/11 was an inside job! 9/11 was an inside job! 9/11 was an inside job!
9/11 was an inside job! 9/11 was an inside job! 9/11 was an inside job! 9/11 was an inside job! Why'd you go to the school that day? Why'd the Secret Service let you stay? Didn't know the extent of the attack. You just acted like a literary hack. Secret Service, they just stood there. Secret Service, they really didn't care. The whole of the story doesn't add up. 9/11 was an inside job. 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 Hey now, World Trade Center 7. How we fall, how we go to heaven. Barry Jennings says something ain't right. He's as clear as black and white. 47 floors in less than 7 seconds. Thermal expansions, the best as they can reckon. The whole of the story doesn't add up. 9/11 was an inside job. 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 Digging in the PR room. 920 and they're watching all the doom. 8 says it's 50 miles out. 8 says it's 30 miles out. 8 says it's 10 miles out. Hey Dick, do the orders still stand? The whole of the story doesn't add up. 9/11 was an inside job. 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 What about Flight 93? Hit a Pennsylvania field, barely broke a tree. Don't see a jet there, I really do fear. No engines there, no landing gear. Susan McElwain said it with no jet. She's sticking to a star and she's got no regrets. The whole of the story.
Small World Radio. 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 Small World